Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there.
Today, we're heading into, well, the somewhat shadowy world of the Colacurcio organization.
Sometimes called the Seattle Crime Family, right?
Exactly. And we'll be drawing mainly on an overview of the group's history and activities.
Okay.
Our goal here is really just to understand the key elements, how this organization worked, what made it tick, and, the impact it had.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Okay, let's unpack this. Frank Colacurcio, he founded this outfit in Seattle way back in the 1950s. What was the starting point? Like, what were they doing initially?
Well, initially, believe it or not, their activities revolved around cigarette and jukebox vending machines.
Vending machines. Really? It seems pretty low-key for organized crime.
Right.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is why these seemingly ordinary businesses were so appealing.
Okay.
They offered a relatively simple way to skim cash, taking unreported income right off the top.
Ah, okay. So consistently underreporting sales, that kind of thing.
Exactly. A little bit here, a little bit there. It adds up pretty fast. A classic money laundering, or rather money skimming technique.
Right. So a legitimate-looking front, but also a discreet way to pocket extra untaxed money. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Then it seems the focus shifted towards, well, more openly illegal stuff. The info we have mentions a big move into prostitution in the late 50s through some kind of partnership.
Yeah, that was a pretty crucial step in their expansion. Frank Colacurcio, he joined forces with James Big Jim Elkins.
Elkins. He was a Portland crime figure, wasn't he?
That's the one, a big name down there. This alliance basically allowed Colacurcio to set up shop with prostitution operations in Portland.
So broadening their reach significantly.
Yeah, moving beyond just Seattle, it really expanded the scope of his whole criminal enterprise.
And it sounds like they didn't just stop there. The 1960s saw another evolution, right? This time into the Seattle nightlife scene with topless clubs.
That's right.
And I'm guessing the skimming just
Yeah.
continued in this new area.
Oh, absolutely, precisely. The move into Seattle's topless clubs just provided another stream of, let's call it, illicit income.
Okay.
These places, I mean, they look like legitimate entertainment venues on the surface,
Sure.
but behind the scenes, they became another way to skim cash and also, exert control within that part of the local economy.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The story jumps to the 1970s, and there's this meeting with some pretty serious mafia connections. Tell us about Frank Colacurcio sitting down with Salvatore Bill Bonanno.
Right, Bill Bonanno. So, yeah, in the 70s, Colacurcio met with him, member of the, infamous Bonanno crime family out in Yakima, Washington.
Yakima, okay. What was the significance there? Were they trying to partner up?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? The meeting itself suggests the potential for collaboration, maybe expanding influence. It definitely raises questions about what kind of business relationship they might have been exploring.
New territories, maybe. Or
Yeah.
different kinds of crime.
Could be either, or both. Extending their reach, getting into new rackets. It suggests ambition, definitely.
And Colacurcio's response when he was asked about this meeting is, well, it's memorable.
Huh.
Yeah.
The whole thing about hot peppers and no bananas, referencing the Bonanno family's internal conflict, the Banana Wars,
Yeah,
that's quite a denial.
it really is. It's sort of a classic tactic in those circles, isn't it? Using coded language, misdirection.
Deflection.
Totally. The reference to bananas and the Bonanno family's troubles. It was a way to kind of sidestep any serious connection while still, maybe winking at the issue.
What does that tell us, though, connecting the dots?
Well, big picture, it really underscores how interconnected these different organized crime networks could be, even across different regions, different families. They knew each other. They talked.
Right. Okay, so let's fast forward a few decades. The strip club business kept growing, apparently.
It became their main thing, really. But this expansion, ironically, seems to have played a big role in their eventual downfall. With the launch of Strippergate in 2003, what was that? What sparked that investigation?
Yeah, Strippergate. It zeroed in specifically on the strip clubs owned by Frank Colacurcio Sr. and his son, Frank Colacurcio Jr.
Okay.
Now, our source doesn't spell out the exact trigger, but it's pretty likely that these businesses, which had been around for ages, had attracted law enforcement attention just due to ongoing suspicions.
Just years of maybe rumors, complaints.
Probably. Or maybe some financial irregularities finally got noticed. Maybe informants provided tips. Something set it off.
And those suspicions were confirmed pretty dramatically in 2008. There were raids, right, on Colacurcio's home, his businesses.
Damn raids, yeah. Local police, federal agents, the whole 9 yards.
And the big revelation was that These strip clubs were allegedly just fronts for brothels. That really ups the ante on the charges.
It absolutely does. That's a major escalation. The raids seem to confirm what investigators suspected. The clubs weren't just about entertainment. They were allegedly being used to facilitate prostitution on a large scale.
So that shifts the focus, right? From maybe just financial stuff, skimming, tax evasion.
Exactly. It shifted the focus towards much more serious charges involving racketeering.
Explain racketeering again quickly.
Sure. It's basically engaging in a pattern of organized criminal activity. Often involves things like extortion, illegal businesses like prostitution rings, bribery, operating a criminal enterprise, essentially.
Got it. Which then led straight to indictments in 2009. And it wasn't just the two Colacurcios named, was it?
That's right. Frank Sr., Frank Jr., and 4 others were indicted. Charges of conspiracy and racketeering.
So authorities clearly believed they'd found a coordinated operation.
Yeah, they weren't just looking at individuals, but a whole criminal enterprise involving multiple people working together.
And then things started to unravel pretty quickly for them. We saw guilty pleas from several key figures in April 2010.
Yes, that was significant. Frank Colacurcio Sr.'s nephew, Leroy Richard Christensen,
Okay.
along with a club manager, Stephen Michael Fuston, an associate named David Carl Ebert, and even Colacurcio Sr.'s driver, John Gilbert Conte.
Wow, the driver too.
Yeah, they all pleaded guilty to charges related to the prostitution and racketeering.
That must have put a lot of pressure on the remaining defendants.
Oh, definitely. These pleas provided more evidence for the prosecution and showed that people inside the organization were cooperating, or at least folding.
Which was followed by Frank Colacurcio Jr.'s guilty plea just a couple of months later, in June 2010. That feels like the real turning point in dismantling the whole thing.
It really was a major turning point.
Yeah.
Frank Jr. pleading guilty to racketeering and conspiracy. I mean, that's essentially acknowledging the criminal enterprise existed and admitting his major role in it.
Sent a clear message.
Yeah, it signaled that the authorities had built a very strong case. The writing was on the wall.
Now, there's a sad note here. Frank Colacurcio Sr., the founder, he actually passed away in July 2010, right in the middle of all this.
Yeah, he died at age 93 before he could be sentenced or face trial on those final charges.
But the legal process against his son, Frank Jr., continued. He was sentenced in September 2010. What was the final outcome for him?
Frank Colacurcio Jr. got sentenced to 1 year in prison.
Just 1 year. Seems light, maybe?
But compared to potential racketeering sentences, maybe. But there was also a very substantial fine, $1.3 million.
Okay, that's significant.
And maybe even more importantly, he was also ordered to forfeit his interest in the strip clubs and all the related property.
Forfeit, meaning he lost it all.
Pretty much. The value was estimated at over $6 million.
Yeah.
So the idea was to hit the financial side hard, dismantle the economic power base of the whole organization, take away the assets derived from the crime.
Right, take away the profits and the means of production, so to speak. So if we were to really summarize, just nail down the core of what this organization was actually doing, the information points to a pretty clear list of criminal activities.
Yeah, the overview lays it out. The primary activities attributed to the Colacurcio organization were racketeering, as we discussed, prostitution, extortion, money laundering, corruption, and fraud.
Quite the list. And their territory was mainly Washington State.
Primarily Washington State, yes.
Yeah.
And they were active for a really long time, decades, from the 1950s right through to the 2010s when it all came crashing down.
So looking back then, we've traced this whole story from its beginnings in, seemingly harmless vending machine businesses, right,
That innocuous start.
through the expansion into increasingly illicit ventures like prostitution, the strip clubs, those attempted connections with bigger mafia networks,
The Banana meeting.
and then ultimately the investigation, the Strippergate scandal, and the final dismantling of the organization.
Exactly. It's a pretty clear arc. The history of the Colacurcio organization really illustrates how organized crime can, evolve and adapt over decades.
Yeah.
They change their outward appearance, their main businesses.
But maintain that core of criminal activity underneath.
Precisely. And yeah, the Strippergate investigation definitely marked the end of an era for them.
This has been a really fascinating, if kind of sobering, deep dive.
It usually is with these topics.
Yeah. It really prompts you to think, though, about the enduring presence of organizations like this within communities and the continuous challenge for law enforcement and society of combating organized crime, especially when it operates over such long periods.
It's a constant battle for sure.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener. Considering the Colacurcio organization's lifespan, right? from the 1950s all the way to the 2010s. What does that tell us about the long-term evolution and, frankly, the resilience of criminal enterprises? How do they manage to persist for so long? It's definitely something to consider long after our discussion here.